Hi, I'm Linda Mal, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Dallas Museum of Art and speak with Associate Conservator of Objects, Fran Baas, about the museum's exhibition, Modern Opulence in Vienna, the Wittgenstein Vitrine. Now for Art This Week. Hi, I'm here with Fran Baas, Associate Conservator with Dallas Museum of Art, to talk about the Wittgenstein Vitrine. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you. So Fran, what were your thoughts when you first saw the piece, both artistically and in terms of conservation?
When I first saw it, I looked at it as more of a project and with a bunch of different components. I knew that there was a chance to bring it back to its obviously original opulence, but I looked at it more as kind of an art doctor, as what needed to be fixed and the different components involved.
Could you tell us a little bit about what shape the piece was in when you first saw it?
There were several issues that needed to be addressed, and I can take that into basically three different sections. There were several pieces of glass that needed to be fixed, including one side panel that was entirely missing. Second, the wooden base, and I will probably talk about this a bit more, had been heavily altered in the past. And the third thing was the disfiguring silver tarnish and the large amount of polish residue trapped in every crevice.
So Fran, what are your steps to conserve work, and especially as applied to the vitrine?
It is the first thing that conservators do is we bring it into the lab and we look at it. We look at it for a long period of time. This is also where I looked at it with Kevin. And I thought about what the different materials involved, how it was constructed, what were the needs of some of the different, wood is entirely different than silver and has different needs, and including the pearls. The pearls have different needs, and so I needed to wrap my head around how am I going to do this in the time frame that I have. And in this case, I had about 8 months.
8 months to restore.
Yeah.
Well, when you see a work like the vitrine, knowing you're going to conserve it, what are the first things you think? What is your plan of attack?
My first thought was, how long do I have? And then I prioritized within that. I don't work alone, I work in conjunction with the curator, and in this case it was Kevin. So Kevin and I looked at it together, discussed what I could do and what our goals were going to be. And in this case, it was going to be bring it back to its, as much as we possibly could, to its original 1908 appearance. Part of conservation is using appropriate materials for the project and reversible methods. So the materials that I used are not crazy commercial products. They are standard material. To clean the silver, I used a calcium carbonate, precipitated calcium carbonate, which is a chalk. And you can put it in different solvents, and in this case it was just water and ethanol. That took us through the whole silver cleaning. That and a brush, a stiff brush and a soft brush. Cotton swabs, lots of rags.
So for instance, the calcium carbonate, how did that work with the silver tarnish? Do you know how?
Precipitated calcium carbonate is a chalk that is specially sized. You purchase it from a specialty manufacturer that takes the calcium particles and they're smooth around the edges. So it's not a harsh abrasive. Like something that you would get into the store might have really large particle sizes, which could scratch your silver. Precipitated calcium carbonate is a more uniform size. Each of the particles are a uniform size, so it's a softer abrasive than something that you would get over the counter.
What were some of the most important needs for the work? Where did it need the most conservation?
What probably took me 3/4 of my time was removing the old polish residue that was trapped in every crevice and trapped between the silver elements and the glass. And then I knew that was going to take the longest because I needed to deassemble it. And in deassembling it, that alone is a large project because I needed to take out every screw, organize every screw, make sure that screw, when in the end, was going to be returned back to its original hole. So I had to organize all several hundred screws to make sure that A1 went back into the A1 hole. And anyway, until we assemble it. And I knew that that was going to take the longest. The other projects, let's see, the glass, we farmed out a few things. We had the missing glass panel on the side. We took tracings of the original that remained, and we had a specialty glass company work on constructing that for us. We also worked with a local frame and furniture conservator to help us with the base. And then mine was the technical analysis and the cleaning of the silver and the repair of the glass.
And you mentioned that you outsourced the fabrication
Yes.
of the glass piece.
Yes.
Why did you choose to use that, that company?
That's a very good question. There are not a lot of companies that still do glass slumping on this scale, and our curve is called a complex curve, so it goes around and up on the edges, which actually is a rather difficult specialty glass. And to make it, we couldn't use a sand cast because it would have been too heavy because it's quite large. So they needed to make us a specialty steel mold. And they used a tracing that we did of the original piece to fabricate it. And there's not a lot of companies, and it actually took us quite a while to find this company, and they did a wonderful job. They still work in very old school methods, and the people that work there have been doing it for generations.
How many hours did you spend on the work where you felt that you were content that the restoration had been completed?
Probably up until the last minute, probably. I probably could have worked on it even longer doing different things, and there's still some things that I think Kevin and I could discuss in the future, such as the one missing moonstone, maybe making a replacement for that. But otherwise, I'm very, very happy with the time that I spent on this. It took about 8 months, and I didn't work on it every day. It is very exhausting, and it's also physically and mentally exhausting to focus because all of your attention gets directed to something. I mean, all of your senses have to be on when you're working on a work of art. And so I only could do it for a couple of hours a day. I also have a lot of other objects that I also have to address, but this was the main project for the last 8 months. And I'm very, very, very content with the way it looks. It looks remarkable, and it looks totally different. One of the things that I am most proud of is now the translucency, that you can see through the glass to the other side. Before, when it first came in, it was still a glorious piece, but the large amount of polish residue prevented you from seeing all the way through, and now you can see to the other side, and you can even see how the pearl clusters are attached, which I find fascinating.
Have you worked on a piece of silver of this size before here
No.
at the DMA?
No.
So
No and no. No, nothing this large. I've worked on lots of silver objects, but nothing this large. And it's also not just a silver object, it's a complex construction, and that was exciting for me because it was like taking a car apart. I mean, I took a lot of the elements apart, and they were all over the studio, and that was nerve-wracking but also exciting to see how many pieces there were and how it was constructed. And all of this I shared with Kevin throughout the whole process. Whenever I found anything interesting, if I opened something up and I said, oh, look how the ladies, I call them ladies, the sentinels were attached. You know, I found that fascinating. There's even little screws. There's one screw in one of her, out of her 2 feet, one of her feet is attached with a screw that is about the size of a pinhead. This tiny little screw. That kind of information is fascinating to share with Kevin.
And Fran, what new information came out of the research and conservation of the work? What did you learn about the processes of the Vienna Werkstatt?
You could definitely see different hands involved in the construction, and you can see it. It was fascinating to see all of the stamps of all of the different craftsmen involved. Every element. I mean, so it wasn't just the line of craftsmen that are marked down on the bottom, as you can kind of see through there on the silver, on the plate down at the bottom, but they're on every single element, and that was fascinating. Another thing that I found really fascinating was, and this was, I guess, getting into the mind of the craftsman, the front panel and the back panel are constructed like stained glass windows. There is a silver element and then the glass, and it was attached. When in taking it apart to clean the back side of the silver element, when you open it up, you could see along the side of the glass, there is registration marks, you know, like say this one was number 5 and that one was number 6. There are 5 slash marks on the side of the glass, and it matched up with a number 5 along the back of the silver. I mean, so it's like you could go, oh, they were following a pattern, they were following a plan, and that was interesting.
You mentioned also that the restoration of the wood base was quite a project unto itself. Could you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, yes. We worked with a local frame and furniture conservator, and it was kind of a mutual collaboration. He would, first when we took it apart, we took the base away, and Kevin and I and Alton all looked at it, and we noticed some things that were interesting. And also Kevin knew the history and had looked into the history of the base, and we noticed first through a bunch of different old images that the look of the base had changed. And one of the images showed a parquet look to it. And when we took it off, we noticed some interesting things. We noticed that the bottom had been cut. You know, there were saw marks on the bottom. And we started to look at some of the old images and we're like, wait a minute, this is shorter than it used to be. That's probably why there's saw marks. This is interesting. And so we looked a little bit more into it and we realized that there were several inches that had been cut off. And we knew that because of the old photographs and also just looking at it, that what we had gotten was a alteration of the base. So we were able to take off the non-original layers of veneer and return it to the original wooden substructure. And we then, because there's a beadwork around, right underneath the silver, there is some molding, and that molding is original to it. So Alton found a Macassar ebony veneer that matched the original molding and re-veneered it in a very traditional way.
We want to thank Fran for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to dma.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.